I'm Doug Muzzio. This is City Talk. In 2008, New Yorkers filed 7,421 complaints against New York City police officers for the use of excessive force, abuse of authority, discourtesy, or offensive language. All of these complaints will go to or have gone to the Civilian Complaint Review Board. To talk about the Civilian Complaint Review Board and the NYPD is William Kuntz. Dr. Kuntz is a partner at Baker and Hostetler, where he specializes in commercial litigation. Bill has been an associate professor at Brooklyn Law School and is a member of the executive committee of the Association of the Bar of the City of New York and a member of the advisory committee on civil practice in the state of New York. He has also served on the Board of Legal Services, and he was appointed to the CCRB as one of the public members when it was still part of the NYPD in 1987. He is one of New York City's civic treasures. Welcome, Bill. It's been a long time.
Doug, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with you.
The New York Times, in a major front page piece titled "Police Polish Image, but Concerns Persist." As the longest serving member of the Civilian Complaint Review Board, you've seen it all and you've dealt with many of these concerns. Before we talk about the substance of what you've seen, what is the CCRB? Give us some of its history and its evolution and its mission.
Thank you. The Civilian Complaint Review Board is an agency that consists of mayoral, police, and city council designees. The first CCRB was created in 1953 when the police department decided that it needed to have input from members of the public about how police officers were in fact operating in the field. From 1953 into the mid-1960s, it was internal to the police department. There was something called the Lindsay Board, which you may recall, in the 1960s.
Hot.
And at that point, by executive order, Mayor Lindsay added people from outside of the police department to make recommendations to the police commissioner. That was overturned by a referendum.
After a bitter campaign led by the head of the Policemen's Benevolent Association.
Right. And then it returned to being completely internal to the police department for a number of years. In the mid-1980s, after a number of high-profile cases, Bumpers, Stewart, the stun gun cases in Queens, a number of legislators went to Mayor Koch and then Police Commissioner Ward and urged them to add public members to the board. I was one of those public members who was added in October of 1987. At that time, the board consisted of 12 members, 6 appointed by the police commissioner, 6 appointed by the mayor with the advice and consent of the city council. We made recommendations to the police commissioner at that time. As you may recall, in 1993, there was a change in the law, and the entire CCRB was taken outside of the police department, and the structure was changed as follows. You have 5 mayoral designees, 5 city council designees, and 3 police department alums who have to have what's referred to colloquially as guns and badges experience. In short,
they were in the field.
Cops. They were in the field. And we've had people such as Ben Ward, former police commissioner Richard Condon, former First Step Tony Simonetti, former First Step David Scott, high-ranking, superb police officials on the board. We also have, just to make it clear, on every one of our panels, and we'll talk about the structure in a bit, I'm sure, we have a mayoral person, a council person, and a police department person on every complaint that comes in. There is never a complaint that is not looked at by all 3 sets of eyes as we make our recommendations to the police commissioner.
I mentioned the 7,421 complaints in 2008 for those 4 categories, which you guys call fatal, force, abusive language, discourtesy, and offensive language. I've got an interaction with a cop. I believe that I've been mistreated. What do I do? How do I make a complaint?
The simplest, easiest way is to pick up your cell phone, dial 311. They will immediately transfer you into CCRB. The complaint will be lodged and receive a number, and the complaint is then on file.
And you have to investigate this
Yes.
complaint? All complaints are investigated?
All complaints that come to us are investigated. Now, for example, if we get a complaint and we find out that the person was not a member of the NYPD, obviously that complaint will be disposed of. But every complaint against a member of the NYPD that comes to us, we investigate.
How does it work? So I make the complaint. What happens then?
Let us say that you have the following complaint. A citizen calls up and says a police officer used force against me. He shoved me, he called me an offensive name, and he took my wallet. Let's say that's what happened, according to the complainant. The taking of the wallet is a corruption allegation. The CCRB does not have jurisdiction over corruption, never has. That goes to internal affairs. However, the force and the offensive language, we will investigate. We will take from the complainant the details in person and over the phone as to what they say transpired. We will then talk with the police officer. We have subpoena power. Police officers come down. That's been litigated. They are required to come down, and they do come down. And we will say to the officer, did you have an interaction with the citizen? The officer will say yes or no. The officer, by the way, has counsel present, PBA reps present, and the question will be asked to the officer, what happened? It might go as follows. The officer says, Bill Kuntz was driving his car. He went through a stop sign. I pulled him over. I said, you went through a stop sign? He said, I'm sorry, officer. He said, so am I. Here's your ticket. Drive more carefully. Have a nice day. That's it. Did you take his wallet? No. Did you use offensive language? No. Did you shove him? No. You then interview the officer's partner. What happened? The officer's partner gives you the same story. You've heard from Bill Kuntz. You turn to Bill Kuntz's wife and you say, all right, what happened? So, my husband went through a red light. I told him to drive more carefully. Okay? That is a case where you're not going to substantiate it against the police officer. Now I'll give you the same basic allegation. Question of the police officer. I don't remember whether I stopped Bill Kuntz. Well, here's the ticket where you gave him a ticket. Yeah, I guess I did. Did you say anything offensive? No, I don't really recall saying anything offensive. He asked his partner. Well, I was there the whole time, and I really don't have a clear recollection of what happened.
Ooh.
Okay. Then you say to his wife, okay, who is a school marm, a wonderful woman, a Mother Teresa, what happened? You say, you know, my husband has driven for 30 years. He's Casper Milquetoast. He always stops at lights. He always stops at stop signs. And this police officer clearly was having a bad day, called him over, was very, very offensive to him. I don't know, maybe he had a fight with his wife, but it was just terrible. And my 3 kids in the back were upset, saying, Mommy, Daddy, police officer's supposed to help us. How did this happen? Okay, and then it just so happens that there was a camera at the intersection, that part of the Ring of Steel, that caught the whole encounter. And we say, well, officer, you know, it's very interesting. We'd like to show you what the camera at that stop sign showed, and you did seem to have a very bad day. And he says, well, perhaps I had a bad memory of that. Now, that's a case that we might substantiate.
Okay. Now, what does it mean to substantiate?
That we found that the allegations were, in fact, proven. And we refer the case to the police commissioner and say, here is a case where the complainant made the following allegations. We believe that what happened did, in fact, happen.
Okay.
That it was not proper. And we recommend a level of discipline, charges and specifications being the most serious, that's up to and including firing, command discipline being basically 5 to 15 days of lost pay, and instructions where the officer is simply instructed.
So there are 3 basic responses.
3 basic responses. Okay. There's also a mediation program, which I'll talk about a little bit later.
But you only make recommendations.
Correct.
Once it leaves your hands, it's in the police department's hands, and
under,
they've got total purview over this.
Under the charter, it is the call of the police commissioner, and in my view, should be the call of the police commissioner as to whether or not to impose discipline in that relatively small percentage of cases that is substantiated. We take our obligations at the CCRB very seriously. We do not substantiate cases if we think there is not a basis to do so. The public should understand. We are not in the business. We did not fall off Cabbage Patch trucks, all right? So if someone has behaved very badly to a police officer and they think they're going to damage the police officer's career by filing a CCRB, let me tell them here now, as we say in Brooklyn, forget about it. It's not going to happen, okay? It is not going to happen. We understand meritless complaints. We have 3 very sophisticated people who look at each and every complaint.
Talk about the makeup of that team of 3 people and how it actually operates in the room.
Right. We get investigative reports, as I said, from our investigators who go out in the field, who interview the police officers, the witnesses. If there are medical records involved, we have subpoena power. We get the medical records in. They write a report to us describing what the police officers have said, the witnesses have said, what the documents indicate. That, in turn, is reviewed by a supervisor within the CCRB to make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, all the witnesses that needed to be spoken with, the documents retrieved.
And these are all civilians?
These are all civilians.
And
now, some of them
have had police department experience?
Not NYPD,
okay,
but law enforcement.
Okay.
We have some FBI alums.
ADAs.
We have some people who are former ADAs who work as lawyers or investigators. We have college and business school graduates. It's a real mix of investigators with a lot of experience, and we have supervisory levels that have been layered in as well. Those reports come to panels I've described, one of each of the 3 designating authorities, and we review those reports. We meet, obviously, in executive session as we review those reports, and we have full and candid discussions with respect to each of those cases. We look at what the citizen has said, we look at what the officer has said, we look at the documents, we look at the tapes, we bring our real-world expertise to it, and then we vote as a panel to make a recommendation to the police commissioner. If any one member of our panel of 3 disagrees with the recommendation, they can either just indicate that they disagree with it, or they can refer it to the full board.
Oh, okay.
So if I feel very strongly that a case is improperly decided by my panel and I cannot convince 2 of my 3 panel members to vote my way, I can either just agree to be outvoted, or I can say, you know what, this is something where I think if we took this to the full board, and again in our executive sessions, they would see it differently. And very often, other panel members will say, yeah, it's a close call, let's send it. Or even if they don't say that, any one member. So understand, the city council designee has the authority to say, I disagree with the mayor and the police commissioner designees, it's going to the full board. The police department representative can say, I disagree with my mayoral and council colleagues, and so forth. So we have a check on each other to make sure that we stay within our guidelines.
Does it ever, or does it usually break down according to any lines, or is it just almost really on the merits of the case?
It is on the merits of the case.
So you don't have any institutional loyalties or perspective. I mean, there's certain perspectives, but not loyalties.
That is correct.
Okay. Now.
And that has been correct for 22 years. There's nothing new about that.
Now, you have a relationship with the NYPD.
Yes.
In some sense, and we've talked about this, the NYPD needs you, that you perform this valuable function for them. Describe the relationship between the CCRB as a body, as an institution, and the NYPD as an institution, and their mutual interrelationships.
Let me give it to you by way of an example that I like to use from the business world. Let's take a company like Microsoft, founded by Bill Gates, billionaire, genius. If you call Microsoft and say you're having a problem with a Windows application, the person says, I'm sorry to hear that, tell me what your problem is, and we'll try to help you. We'll try to make it right. We'll try to fix it. You wouldn't expect the person to say, Bill Gates is a billionaire, he created Microsoft, Outlook and Windows are great, you must be a moron. Have a nice day. Okay? So, when you call CCRB, people will say to you, I'm sorry that you had something happen that you feel badly about. Tell me what happened. Now, it may turn out that the person is the equivalent of someone who didn't plug in the proper Outlook applications at Microsoft. Or it may turn out that there is a problem with the application. And the CCRB's job is to let the police commissioner know that there is a problem. There are 40,000 people approximately in the NYPD. It's a human institution. There are going to be problems. The police department needs the eyes and ears of the public. When you send people out on patrol, yes, there are sergeants and there are command structures, but the truth of the matter is it's the public who will say, you know, we never used to have a problem on this beat, and now we have a new officer and there's a problem. We look at that and we advise the police commissioner with respect to whether we see that as a problem or not. Let me give you a concrete example, if I can, that might take this down from the 30,000-foot level. Many years ago, when we were internal to the police department, 2 cases came across my panel's desk. And they had the following scenario. There was a young police officer who felt that a particular community, in the Williamsburg community, was getting special treatment by being allowed to double and triple park, the Hasidic community. And he was writing tickets dissuading them from doing that. And he was getting a lot of complaints. At the same time, there was another officer, a little bit more senior, who had a problem. He was a staunch right-to-lifer, and he would lecture women who were going in and exercise their right to choose while he was on duty.
At abortion clinics?
On abortion clinics when he had abortion clinic duty. And he got a lot of complaints from the women who were going in to exercise their right to choose. Now, I looked at these 2 officers' files, and I said to my fellow board members, who at that point were deputy police commissioners, it's up to the police commissioner to run the police department. But you know, I don't understand why you got the first cop in Williamsburg with the large Hasidic community when that's the only area where he seems to have an issue. And I don't understand why you have the other cop on abortion clinic duty where that's the only area where he seems to have issues. I understand officers are supposed to follow orders and so forth, but all you're doing is A, destroying the careers of these 2 officers, and B, alienating the public. And I said to them, this isn't rocket science, gentlemen and ladies. Why don't you switch these 2 cops? Why don't you A, save their respective careers, and B, make the public that they serve happier? And they did that, and the complaints stopped. So my point is, it wasn't something that was going to come to the attention of the police commanders necessarily. Mm-hmm. It was the public. And this is where CCRB, who takes complaints from the public, can be of tremendous added value to the department and to the officers. We also have a mediation program that's led by Professor Carol Liebman of Columbia Law School.
Talk about that briefly.
Well, it's very, very successful. You have appropriate cases where you may have a language issue or you may have a discourtesy issue. If the citizen and the officer are both willing to mediate, and the police department has encouraged mediation and certainly the CCRB.
Sit down face to face.
You sit down face to face with a facilitator, no lawyers in the room, even though it's my profession. Sometimes lawyers create problems.
We understand
all right?
this.
I'm sure you do, Doug. And so the bottom line is we take the lawyers out of it, and everyone sits and says, you know, here's what was going through my mind, the police officers, when I pulled you over. And the citizen says, here's what was going through my mind. And the citizen may say, you know, I was kind of having a bad day, and maybe I did run that red light. Maybe it wasn't still yellow. And the officer says, maybe I did get out of the wrong side of bed today. Maybe I was a little harsh in my language to you. And again, there's no record, mediation, and the 2 get to talk it out. I don't know anyone who hasn't had the proverbial bad hair day in their profession.
Sure.
I have, I'm sure you have, everyone does. So if you can take things that truly are mediable, where the officer and the citizen have an opportunity to talk and where it is appropriate. We're not talking about heavy force cases.
Right.
We're not talking about cases where there's something in the officer's record or there's something about the citizen where the officer says, I don't want to mediate the case. Either the citizen or the officer can say thanks or no thanks to mediation. It's never imposed, but it is an option. And over time, it's been more and more successful, and Professor Liebman deserves tremendous credit for making that work and work well.
One of the things that's come out of what you're saying is the relationship between the NYPD and the CCRB is really very symbiotic, and it's not really adversarial. And to use your Microsoft analogy, the CCRB makes the NYPD a better product.
We believe that. We know that, for instance, the NYPD values the information that we provide.
How do you know that?
Because on those occasions when someone in the past has said, well, maybe we shouldn't make the complaints immediately available real time to the police department. Maybe they should get the file at the end after we've reviewed it and investigated it and make a recommendation. Every police commissioner has said to us, not on your life. We want to know instantly, real time, what a citizen has said. So even if the citizen is someone that they perhaps feel at the end of the day is unreliable, has an agenda, even if the complaint is not substantiated, even if the complaint is filed by someone who is a recidivist filer of complaints that inevitably turn out to have no basis, the police department wants to know about it, because sometimes bad things happen to bad people, and the police department wants to know if their officers are behaving appropriately or not.
Okay, let's look at complaints. I basically have two sets of questions. There was a dramatic increase in complaints from 2002 to 2006, and this sort of was like a psychological disconnect. You had the Giuliani years, hard ass, tough mayor, pro cop, law and order, and then you have Bloomberg. Why the increase in complaints?
I mean, the Giuliani years, whereas Giuliani people would say they were progressive and they brought the crime rate down and they made the city safer. I guess I wanted to say that there's another way of articulating what they've said. But I understand. I've heard it both ways. And if you'd said it the other way, I would have given you the other way.
I buy your.
I'm the line judge at the tennis match, all right? So I hear both sides.
Go ahead.
I didn't want anyone to think that I was buying into one. All right.
I don't want to. Don't buy into anything I say.
All right. Fair enough. Here's the issue from what I perceive. Mayor Giuliani came in the height of the crack wars and was a law and order man, was a former prosecutor, and he took personal ownership of police department decisions. You saw him before you saw Bill Bratton or Safer. Mayor Bloomberg, on the other hand, is a business mayor. And he has said to Police Commissioner Kelly, in effect, you run the department, you'll do those press conferences, and you will be seen as taking the lead. In both instances, the police commissioner works for and at the direction of the mayor. At the same time, the period you're talking about, we've had tremendous advances in technology. We have cell phones now. If something happens with a police officer, the citizen 15, 20, 22 years ago would have to get to a phone, or get to a place where they could write, contact the police department to file a complaint. Now, you whip out your cell phone. You don't have to remember the number of the CCRB, 212-442-8833. You just dial 311 and
Which
bang.
Makes it easier.
Which makes it easier.
Whether you have a cell phone or not.
Exactly, and whether there's any merit to the complaint or not. And bang, your complaint is now on file. It is more transparent. This is both good and bad. It's good in the sense that the filters, the barriers to filing a complaint are virtually nil because of the almost ubiquitous nature of cell phones. The bad part of it is, for those who believe that the mere increase or decrease in complaints tells you something about how the police department is interacting with the public, it's a mistake. And the classic example from the Mullen Commission report, go back in history, at the time that the 30th precinct was literally awash with criminality. The Dirty 30, as it was called, where you had police officers who were engaged in criminality. Many of them were prosecuted and went to jail. The number of complaints being filed at that time in the city of New York generally was going down, and the number of complaints filed against the NYPD in the 30th precinct was going down. So when people say to me, the number of complaints are up, that must mean the police are behaving more badly, I will tell you this. The number of complaints was going down when the Dirty 30 was doing their worst. So I say to everyone, even though I'm the only one who says it, it's not a closed-end system. Do not believe for one instant that the mere increase or decrease in complaints at CCRB tells anything like the whole story. People can file complaints directly with the NYPD that do not necessarily get referred to the CCRB by the NYPD. People can file 1983 actions in federal court that wouldn't come to the CCRB. There are other avenues to file complaints. However, that being said, we are one of the principal avenues and are proud to be one of the principal avenues.
So what do complaints mean? In a sense, you've told us what they don't mean necessarily, but what do they mean then?
What they mean is that a citizen has taken it upon himself or herself to complain about a police officer, period, full stop. It may mean that that citizen is a chronic complainer. It may mean that the police officer has done something awful, unlawful, and terrible, up to and including an improper use of deadly force. All it means is someone has filed a complaint. There is a saying in baseball by umpires, there's balls and there's strikes, but there ain't nothing till I call them. The truth of the matter is the mere filing of a complaint, and I've said this for 22 years and I continue to say it, is simply the mere filing of a complaint. It may be something that tells a story that is horrific. It may be something that the citizen made up. But I will tell you this, any citizen should feel free to file a complaint where something bad has happened. But no citizen should file a complaint against a police officer where it hasn't. Every complaint has a material impact on an officer's career. And people should understand this. And good citizens, if they're having a bad hair day and the officer has been polite, or maybe even a little less than polite, but not really done anything wrong, should remember this. You're filing a complaint that's going to be lodged against that officer forever. It may be exonerated, unfounded, it may be unsubstantiated, but the fact that you filed the complaint is in the file. And every officer should understand, you may come across a young man or a young woman, and you may feel, I've got the power, I can say what I want, I can do what I want, but remember, when you walk away, officer, two things can happen. That citizen can whip out his or her cell phone, and with the ubiquity of cameras, you don't know who else saw what happened. You don't know what else was recorded. You should assume, if you're a police officer, that your mother is standing at one side of you and police commissioner is standing at the other, and then go right ahead and be a good cop. Channel that emotion and that sense the day you were sworn in, that happy look of those officers in that photograph you've got there with their families so proud of them. They swore to preserve and protect and serve the public. Picture that moment when you're a citizen in trouble and you call a police officer and he or she comes and rescues you. That's the core value. In the real world, things are not that dramatic all the time. We have interactions, good hair days, bad hair days. But don't abuse the privilege of being a police officer, and don't abuse the privilege of being a citizen, where if you call a cop and say you've got a problem, he or she is coming. And if you're a police officer and you say to me, Bill Kuntz, I want to talk to you, I'm going to say, yes, officer. Don't abuse that. Don't be an abusive cop. Don't be an abusive citizen.
Thank you. Also, let me tell the viewers, go to the CCRB website, www.nyc.gov/CCRB.
Yes, sir.
It's got a great website. All the questions that I asked of you and many more, lots of data are all there. Thanks very much, Bill.
Thank you very much, Doug. It's an honor to be here. Appreciate it.
Hello, I'm Doug Muzzio. Let us know what you think about this show. You can reach us at CUNY.TV. When you get there, click on the bar that says Contact Us and send your email. Whatever it is. Thanks, no thanks, obnoxious, do it. Send it.